take, but backup is good. Here.
Oh, that's a pretty cool technology.
Yeah, so that sits on my phone, and if I have... Because sometimes I have a really good call and information is shared,
Sure.
and it's like, oh, crap. You know? Okay. See what's going on here.
So did you have to get a license to be able to operate this? No.
Just, they did this training, like this hour-long training.
Yeah. That you can't swear and the things you can say and you can't say. Are you young enough to know George Carlin? The name George Carlin?
Yeah. Why?
The words that you can't say out loud. He's got this routine. I think it was 7 words.
Okay.
You know, you can imagine what they are. I won't say them because we're being recorded. But yeah, you should look up George Carlin, 7 words that you can't say.
Okay.
Whatever. Anyways.
What questions do you have before we go on air?
I mean, basically, why are you doing this?
Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Did you read the guide?
Yeah, I've read your stuff.
Yeah?
But really, why are you, you find it interesting?
Well, first of all, yes, I do this anyways, which you've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Firsthand.
Like, this is just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that this was a way to provide what I was missing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, trying to figure out who's who and, like, really get a sense of their human side and not just their title. But also, what I found as a result that is the most meaningful to me is that at the end of interviews, my guests are glowing. And they are just they say, that was so fun, that went by so fast, you're really good at this. And I'm like, yes. Like, that's what I want.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't even know, I don't get much feedback from listeners.
Do you have any idea how many people listen?
Not live, but when I publish it online, I can see, who goes and listens to it. It's not a lot.
No.
It's not a lot, so.
No. It's a community radio station. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only way you could increase it would be to somehow, maybe if you did it Facebook Live at the same time, could you do that?
It's interesting you say that because my next goal for this next year is to do the video podcast version.
Ah, okay.
So I'm talking to Nate from the station about how to do that and if they have the equipment for it.
Yeah. I think because you just increase your audience. You just have a very limited audience here. So.
Well, if I start, getting to know more people out, they have networks, right? So each guest I have on, I find out pretty quickly how big their network is as soon as I publish online.
Yeah.
And some of them I've had on are, global. And I've got people from,
oh, wow.
different countries that are tuning in, and it's really cool. So it's, who I have on, where they're located. But honestly, I'm not looking for fame.
Yeah.
I just want to provide that feeling of being seen and heard for the community.
Sure.
So, just keep it simple.
Well, I think it's a good foundation for your business.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And I really wanted to make sure that it wasn't coming across as promotional.
Well, I think that's why you're successful, because you're genuine. You do it. I think you're genuine, and it sounds genuine, which is even harder, unless it is.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to fake being genuine, but some people can do it.
There's some psychos out there.
Well, there's actors too that
Yeah.
I think especially, um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting to see from a public relations perspective, um, the power of the podcast, but it also tends to underscore the negative aspects of podcasts, and that is you're speaking to a very specific audience, and that's all you're speaking to.
Yeah.
That's why it causes so much harm, especially when it's a negative one. And I it's pretty interesting. There was an article in the Times this weekend about whether audiobooks should count as actual reading.
Oh, that's
Did you see that?
No, I'll have to look at that.
So it was like, you can't say you read a book because you listened to it.
Yeah.
It was an interesting article because I find I do a lot of walking for exercise, so I listen to books that I really am interested in, but I would never take the time to read. So I listen to them. And basically, it comes back to your thought of what is reading, and can you still meet those goals when you listen to something? So is a blind person not reading when they listen to a book?
What do you think?
I think they're reading. I think that the person who wrote it intended to communicate, and if
it's being consumed, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Do you want some water?
No, I'm good, thank you. If I have water, then I'll have to pee. This is so cool.
Right?
This space.
I'm going to close this.
Yeah.
Because that fan is loud.
I'm so happy to see this space being used.
Good.
When Nate and the radio station moved in, first they were just here.
Oh, can you save that story? We're going to go on air and we'll talk about it. Because I think it'd be cool to hear it. You ready?
Oh, yeah. Turn your hearing aids off.
Okay. Thank you guys for tuning in today. You're listening to WVNC LP Bethlehem, North Country Community Radio, 99.9 FM, streaming online at nococommunityradio.org. And if you just heard that cough, we have a special guest with us here today. First, just want to make sure you know that you're tuned in to North of Normal with Amanda McKeen. That's me. And today we have Mike Claflin with us for a very special interview for the next hour. So get cozy, get ready for some stories. And Mike, thank you so much for saying yes to my ask.
Sure. Happy to be here, Amanda.
Yeah. So you were just reminiscing about the space that we're in, and I told you to stop talking because I wanted you to share it on air. Can you talk about what you remember this space here being?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, the organization that I used to work with, I had actually purchased this building when I was working there, and this space, which the radio station is in the basement, and at the time, it was unused space. As you can attest, there's no windows, and it was just full of junk. And there was this little teeny closet, which we're sitting in now, which is now the recording studio. And over time, the community radio station was really trying to get a hold in the community. So, because we weren't using the space, the radio station started using the space for free. And as far as I know, it's still free. That allowed them to invest in all of the high-tech stuff they needed to do. in the studio itself, and it's really kind of cool to look to see what it's kind of evolved into.
So, when was the last time you were in here?
Well, I retired from a head, 3 years ago? So,
Okay.
yeah,
So
probably
3 years
3 years ago.
Okay. So, normally what I like to start out with is explaining to listeners how we know each other. This is kind of a interesting path that we found ourselves on. Do you want to explain what you remember about how we met?
I think we became connected in, there was a general um, effort by the community to figure out what the community could do with purchasing the White Mountain School.
Yeah.
And in that sort of effort, I got to meet a lot of really cool people that kind of came out of the woodwork. Ideas about what could be done with the campus. And I think that's the first time that I met you.
Yeah, we were on a virtual meeting.
Yeah. So, being who you are, you took it upon yourself later on in our relationship to ask me out to coffee because you wanted to find out who the gray-haired guy was. And we got to know each other.
Yeah, and that was very memorable for me, the coffee anyways. The conversation around the coffee was definitely unexpected. I learned some things about you that I don't know if many people know. So as I have had my show, I actually sent you an invite like several months ago, and I sent it via email. And I send out invites to people, and I keep moving, and I never followed up. And I was like, oh man, like Mike must not have wanted to come on the show. And I saw you following along on LinkedIn and liking some of my posts. And at some point, I think it was last month, you messaged
Well, you
me.
interviewed one of my favorite people.
Who was that?
Ed King.
Okay. Ed's one of your favorite
Co-op.
people?
Yeah, Ed is one of my favorite people. Yeah,
nice.
He's been able to do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you listened to that.
I did.
Episode.
I listened to the entire show. It was great.
It was great. He had a lot of really cool things to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a heart of gold.
Yeah, so you had messaged me on Facebook and made a comment about that. And I said, hey, like, I'd still love to have you on. And you were like, sure. So I think there was just a few months of misunderstanding there on my part. But so glad you're here. And I was really hoping that we could give the community and our listeners a better understanding of your background and who you are and how you've been such a big part of this community. So where do you want to start?
Well, I can tell you I came to this community, the Littleton community, in 2000.
Okay.
I was recruited to come and work at a bank here. And the weekend that I came, the Monday that I started, that weekend I was married. I had just had my very first grandchild. I moved into a new house with my wife Alice and her 3 children, and I did that and started the new job on Monday, all in the same weekend.
Wow. Where did you move from?
We lived. I had at the time been living in Derby, Vermont, up on the Canadian border.
Yeah.
I was working for a bank up there.
Which bank?
It used to be called the Lindenville Savings Bank.
Okay.
And Alice and I both worked for the bank. That's how we met. And Alice was living at the time in Lindenville with her 3 kids. And that's when we got together.
Okay, so then you got recruited by someone here. Who was that person?
I actually was recruited by a recruiter.
Oh, someone hired?
A hired
A headhunter.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that term. You were headhunted.
Well, and at the time, there used to be a small bank here. You don't know. It was called People's,
Uh-huh.
the People's Bank, and People's had been acquired at the time by the Connecticut River Bank,
Okay.
and so they hired me to come in and try to help with the conversion, the acquisition.
Okay.
And so, I helped transition the community into the new bank.
Interesting. I know that just happened with the bank here. Woodsville just merged with Bar Harbor.
Yeah, I was a banker for most of my career,
Mm-hmm.
and a community banker by choice. Unfortunately, community banking is unfortunately appearing to be not sustainable. So there's a lot of, um, what do they call it? Consolidation
Yeah.
of banks
Yeah.
across the country, and Woodsville is a perfect example. Small banks unfortunately have to respond to the same regulations that large banks do, and with the internet and the amount of crime that goes on in the internet, it's really expensive for banks to be able to keep up with that. So
Yeah.
that's just one of the issues.
Okay. So you came in to support bank transition, and then what? Or
Oh.
you moved into, were you here in Littleton?
So I think when you and I had this, when we first met, so when I got married, Robert was my youngest stepchild, and he was 10 years old. And Franny and Elizabeth were in high school, junior high and high school. And we promised them they could stay in the LI. They were in Linden Institute, which is a great school, and that we wouldn't make them move to Littleton, but that they had to understand that because I was a community banker, that I needed to participate in events and organizations in Littleton, and that I would be out oftentimes at night because I would be attending Littleton functions like the Rotary Club and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So, I made a conscious effort to become connected to the Littleton community through those groups. One of the organizations was the Littleton Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actively with that, and that's sort of how I became, introduced to the Littleton community.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about over our coffee, because when I met with you, I really was kind of lost in trying to figure out how to get to the next step with being integrated here. And I asked you, how did you do it? And your answer was, get involved in the events going on, get involved in the associations and organizations.
And you took those to heart.
I guess so. I did. Yeah, that conversation. I have no doubt it was super important to getting me on the path, on the right path. So back to your story, and I'm asking you questions, that I probably already asked you before, but I definitely want our listeners to get the full picture here. So you got involved in Rotary and Littleton Main Street. At what point do you remember feeling like, okay, I now have the trust of the community?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I would ever put those kinds of words in it.
Yeah.
I think it's like any relationship, even with people. It's a journey, and that you're constantly learning new things. I think that one of the probably most instrumental developments was, a very dear friend of mine. His name was Jeff Wheeler. He owned the Littleton bookstore at the time. I was still at the bank, and I've been a vegetarian for probably, 35, 50 years. But I've been a longtime member of the Hanover Co-op, and Jeff, who actually went to Dartmouth, had been a member of the Hanover Co-op since he was an undergraduate. So we both thought, well, wouldn't it be really cool if we could talk the Hanover Co-op into building a store in Littleton? Excuse me. And so Jeff and I, as members of the Hanover Co-op, we went down there and we met with the general manager, and we asked them if they'd be interested in coming to Littleton. And at the time, they were fairly intrigued.
Okay.
Their general manager and 3 of their board members took a road trip, and they came up to Littleton, and Jeff and I sort of took them around town and said, wouldn't it be cool if you built a store up here? And so we had that dialogue for a while, and they were actually quite taken by Littleton. And unfortunately, at the time, they were in the throes of trying to make a very large real estate purchase. And they said that they didn't really have the capacity to do both that and also to build a store in Littleton. But they thought, why don't you go ahead and have a public meeting in Littleton and try to see what kind of gauge the town and see what kind of interest there was in the store. So I remember it was a snowy, I think it was like April or March. We had a meeting, we announced it, and we had it at the Littleton High School gymnasium. And, hundreds of people showed up.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. And the Hanover Co-op folks were there, 3 of the board members and their general manager, and basically try to convince and tell the people what a co-op was, food co-op.
Yeah.
So,
what was here currently for grocery stores?
I'm sorry? Well, at the time, another friend of mine, his name is Lynn Bixby, he was a reporter. He had retired from the Hartford Courant, and he was a retired investigative reporter. He actually had won a Pulitzer Prize.
Oh.
And Lynn lived in Danville at the time. He still does. And at the time, there was only one grocery store. The other store, Butson's, had closed, and Shaw's was the only game in town.
Wow.
And a lot of people were really upset about that. So Lynn, being the investigative reporter that he was, he came up with a basket of food, a list, and he went around to, I think it was 4 or 5 different Shaw's locations in the entire state of New Hampshire. And he bought the exact same items at every single store. And he found that the prices were different. And he was able to establish that their markup for their stores were individually based on whether there was competition and how much competition was in there. So at the time, Littleton was all by itself. There wasn't another grocery store in town. And in his article, he went to show that this store in Littleton was the most expensive. And the article sort of hit a nerve here in Littleton.
Oh, I bet it
People
did.
were really upset about it. So when the thought that maybe there would be an alternative, a food co-op, even though no one knew what a food co-op was, there was a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how it got started.
That is great momentum right there. Was that the plan, to get that article to coincide with the...
I think this was totally an organic sort of growth.
Good.
I don't think anyone had this great big plan. But I think the most amazing thing that I learned about the community is that for a co-op to work and be successful, it really requires the whole community to buy into it. And I think that through that effort of this store, and so many different people were involved in developing the store, that our Littleton Co-op is the Littleton Co-op, and people will, reach out from all the different communities across New England wanting to replicate the Littleton Co-op, and you can't. I mean, you'd have to replicate the Littleton community.
Yeah.
And so I think the most important aspect that I learned, and, one of the reasons why I think the stores has been so successful is because it's a total reflection of our community. It represents all the different aspects. One of the things that is really cool about the store is how generous the members are. And, that's a reflection of the community.
Yeah.
There's a real participation in the grow local food community. Again, that's an absolute total reflection of the community. We care where our food is grown. In the latest efforts to try to help families that are dependent on SNAP benefits. I don't know if you were at the store, but when you checked out, there was this $10 little coupon. So when you checked out, you could put the $10 and swipe it and add it to your bill.
Gotcha.
And that $10, the food co-op was putting together a package for Thanksgiving.
Nice.
And they did 900 meals.
Wow.
This little store in Littleton did about 900 meals. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
So again, I guess it's, you ask, when did I understand that I became a part of the community? I think being a part of that movement and that whole effort, made me realize that, I was actually a part of the community that way.
Yeah. That's really significant. I'm curious, how did you, were you involved in securing a loan? And how'd you pick out where the co-op was going to go?
So, again, it's an organic thing.
Yeah.
And there was, at the time, we had an incredible board of directors that we engaged, and each of the directors had a skill set that they brought to the table. We had a lawyer, we had a CPA, I was the banker, and so each of us sort of, focused on the area that we were most familiar with. I, focused more on the financing end of the deal, but, by no means was I the only person that was, the only one working on it, because we were all doing it at the same time.
Yeah. I actually spoke to someone yesterday who was a founding member of a pretty big organization, and I was kind of interviewing him just to understand how that all started, and how does it start from an idea to getting to actually real substance, something's there now.
Yeah.
And that is so magical, and every time I hear these stories, the same message comes back, and that it's the right people were there.
Yeah.
It's always that the right people were in the right place at the right time.
There's this woman, her last name's Horowitz. She wrote a book called Mutuality, and she actually was brought into the fold by her father. The very famous family, but the book, and I would recommend it to anyone that's looking into the whole cooperative mutuality movement, because it really outlines the history of the co-op movement, which actually goes way back and has its roots in Europe. There was parts of Europe, a really large section of Spain, actually, where all of the businesses, whether factories or hospitals, were all co-ops. And I think the whole gist and what made them successful was this sense of community, that you're answering the needs of the community that you lived in. And of course, in the United States, the movement towards unionisms and unions sort of, copied that theme. So yeah, I think there's some real benefit to looking at starting at businesses with that general theme.
Yeah. All right. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to go backwards or if I want to go forwards here. Let's go forward. So you helped found the co-op.
Yes, I was there at the beginning. Yes.
Okay. And you were a banker at the time.
I was.
I know at some point you suddenly became the CEO of Ahead, and that's what you're very well known for, at least from what I gather.
So when I was at Ahead, one of my customers was Ahead. When I was at the bank, one of my customers was Ahead.
Yeah.
And Ahead was, they were meeting a need for the community of affordable housing. And at the time, funding for affordable housing was a very complicated process. Involved federal funding, and I became very involved in the whole process. In the meantime, I befriended their existing executive director, David Wood, who started Ahead as a master's thesis when he went back to school to get his master's. And out of that program, he developed and started Ahead. And David decided to retire. And I had moved on from banking. And David twisted my arm and he said, why don't you apply, because you understand the financing part of it. And at the time I had left and started a small real estate private equity concern with Andy Smith. And so when the Ahead board said that I could continue with my efforts with Andy at the same time of trying to lead the Ahead organization, I decided to go ahead and try to do that. So I actually was the executive director at Ahead for 10 years. I signed up for 5 and ended up being there for 10. But yeah, that was a truly transformative part of my life too, because affordable housing back in the day was a code word for poor people.
Yeah.
And when you spoke about affordable housing, everybody kind of looked at you at the side of their eyes and said, that's for those people.
Yeah.
Not really accepting or understanding what affordable housing really meant. And so, 10 years later, when I was left Ahead, the whole definition of what affordable housing had changed. It got turned onto its head because, for the most part, 80% of the people in our country were being faced with that term, and they understood what affordable housing meant, and that it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But it was, not only did it include people who didn't have a lot of resources, it also included a lot of other people. So that was an interesting evolution while I was there.
Yeah. So you must have liked it if you stayed for 2 terms.
I did. I think that it was a rewarding kind of a position. It was, the need was just so great.
Yeah.
So to think that you might be having an impact meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Would you say that that's one of your key driving forces, is to have an impact on the world around you?
Yeah, I look back on my middle stepdaughter, Franny. She grew up and went away. She thought she might want to be a doctor, and when you want to go to med school, now you have to sort of build up your resume.
Yeah.
So she became a consultant in Chicago before she went to medical school. And she would fly around the country visiting community hospitals. And she was trying to help them in the position that she was in. And I'll never forget, she came home and spoke to my wife Alice and I, and she said, you guys, I really appreciate all of the time and efforts that you spend in nonprofit organizations, because I go around the country, and she said, I can't help but notice the small hospitals that have board members who are people who donate their time are the ones that get what their communities need and want. And it's just so much different than going into an urban center. And so she says, I really have begun to appreciate, why you do what you do when you donate your time. And so, I've always remembered those comments. And Franny did, in fact, go on to medical school, and she's, now a doctor in practice in Hanover, actually.
Okay. So it sounds like she sees it, too, that you really care about making a real impact.
And she caught the bug.
She did.
As well.
Yeah. Good. Sounds like you set a good example for her. Okay. I want to reverse a little bit, if that's all right. So, right now, all I know is that your life started in Derby, but I have a feeling that you had a full life before Derby, too.
Well, you and I, we shared this, too. So, I was raised in the military. I grew up in the military. I actually began elementary school in Scotland. I went to high school in Taipei, Taiwan. It was during Vietnam. Chiang Kai-shek was still alive. The island was under martial law. It was formative years for me because, at the time it was a third world country, and I lived in a lot of places in between Scotland and Taiwan as I grew up.
Yeah.
So I got to see and live and experience a part of the world that not a lot of people get to. So that sort of had an impact on my general overview of the world, and I used to, when we lived in Taiwan, we lived in the capital city. The year before I moved there, Madam Chiang Kai-shek had outlawed rickshaws.
Yeah.
And at the time there was a million rickshaws in the city. And if you can imagine a million rickshaw drivers all of a sudden having to become drivers of taxi cabs.
Oh, no.
You can imagine the total chaos that existed in the city. And there was no sewer system. It was like most third world countries, which you have lived in, I know, where the raw sewage goes into ditches along the roads, and those go into larger ditches, so that in the capital city at the time, a lot of that raw sewage just flowed into what were huge rivers.
Yeah.
And so it was a really different part of the world that growing up you got exposed to. So it really does impact the way that you look at the kinds of things that we have here in this country.
Yeah. I can only relate to my own experience, so my questions are probably pretty limited, but what do you remember living with more fear, or did you not even realize that there were dangers when you were there? Like, where was your mental state at that time?
That's a great question.
Oh.
Because when you're a kid, children and kids can adapt to anything.
Yes.
And even though we were in an environment which was martial law, machine guns at every street corner, after the third week, you didn't even notice them.
Yeah.
There were impactful things like, because you were an American, that was obvious. It wasn't unusual for mothers who had babies that couldn't afford them. They would try to give them away to my parents on the street of the city. The amount of poverty was pretty prevalent.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of fear. I don't think I was afraid. I will say that I went to what they call an American school. There was 46 nations that were represented at the school. It had not only all of the foreign embassies, because we were in the capital, their kids went to school there. USAID, which no longer exists, had a very large presence there. A lot of the kids that I went to school with, parents worked for USAID. Also there was a large military presence, American military. So I was exposed to a lot of different cultures.
Yeah.
And it was just something that at the time, was just the way it was.
Yeah.
It was the world.
Yeah.
So that just added to the sort of experience.
Yeah, I went to international school as well in high school.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many nations were represented, but it was the same, sounds like similar, where you had kids from all over with parents who did embassy jobs, military, like really important people.
Corporate CEOs.
Yeah. And it is like the coolest place to be, because you've got all these different languages around you, you've got all these different cultures, and it forms its own little microculture, So, did you feel like you were in a bubble when you were there?
I was, when I left there, I was, 16, 17. So, my whole way of looking at life was totally different than it is now.
Yeah.
And I can't say that at the time that I thought I was in a bubble. You become aware of your culture, you become aware of your race. It's not something that's bad or good. It's just the way the world is.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. But I can't say I lived in a bubble.
Okay. I remember you telling me over coffee that while you were there, you were in a gang.
So yeah, when you're a teenage boy in any culture, you do stupid stuff. At the time, because most of the kids that I hung out with were mostly military.
Okay.
Primarily from urban areas in the United States, and there was an effort to get together, but there was this group of guys, and they had a gang, and they called themselves the Cards.
The Cards.
They wore the black jackets and the whole 9 yards. And I became a member of that group. Some of it was out of self-preservation.
Yeah.
But it was, it was that's what the cool guys did.
Right. I think I have a picture too. You sent it to me. Awesome. So now I'm curious. When you left there, like how long? How many years had you spent in Taiwan?
3.
Okay. So when you left there, you were graduated or almost graduated?
No, almost graduated. Yeah.
How tough was that transition for you to leave after 3 years?
It was culture shock. I remember when we landed. We landed in the United States. It was actually in Washington State, in Oregon. It was the first airport we landed in, and I looked around, and the people who were working, the workers, were white. And I remember noticing that. They're Americans, and we moved to Vermont.
After Taiwan?
And I'll give you another example of culture shock. So we moved to Vermont, and it was in the 70s, and it was really, everybody was hip and cool, and we were going to I went to a newly formed unified district in Vermont, and they were teaching this class called Black History. And so, I took the class, and I found it so interesting because I moved to a town that had less people in it than attended the high school I just left. And, like I said, I had participated in a group of guys. I was one of 2 white people in the gang.
Yeah. And
taking this Black Studies class in Vermont. And it was full of white people. The instructor, who was really cool and was really into, teaching Black Studies, we were reading all of the right books, Native Son and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And no one in that class had ever met someone that was black. And so it was really interesting to try to understand how people were trying to figure out other kinds of people.
Yeah.
And it just became very apparent to me the differences in cultures and in the world, and how you can get around that, how you can learn about each other. And it's always stuck with me. That was sort of ironic that a bunch of white people in Vermont were studying, something that they really didn't know much about.
Yeah. Did you experience any type of grief? Did you miss Taiwan? Did you want to be back there? Like when you came to Vermont, I just think that's so different. You went from city, rickshaws, chaos, guns, to where in Vermont were you?
I was just down the road in Bradford.
Oh, okay.
Actually, Fairleigh, Vermont.
Okay.
So, I don't. I missed it in the sense that it was sort of a romantic, kind of crazy time. But, I had been moving every couple of years my entire life, and so I really enjoyed the fact that, and I embraced the fact, when I came to Vermont and I never left. I've traveled a lot,
yeah,
but I really appreciate being able to raise a family in Vermont and New Hampshire. And I think I have an appreciation for that other people might not have, or that have a different sort of, experience. But, I've often thought about going back. I've never gone back to Taipei. When I left there, I think the tallest building in the city was 8 stories.
Oh.
And there was a time when the tallest building in the world was in Taipei. So a lot has changed since then.
So you moved around every couple of years until you were 18?
17, 16, yeah.
I'm curious if you experienced what I did from that pattern, where every couple of years you started having this
So it's funny you should say that. Yeah, I ran in there. There actually is a psychological.
Let's talk about that because
I forget what it's called,
but it's
I
real.
met an author that wrote a book about it.
Okay.
And it's you raised that every 3, 4, 5 years you need the stimulus of something entirely new.
Yes.
And we're not talking, drinking your coffee black with no sugar and
or
cream.
Buying a new
We're talking
car.
you get in your car and you drive to a different country.
Yes.
And you need that stimulus.
Yes.
I found that as a young male with ODD kind of things, that it was especially prevalent for me that I needed that stimulus of new kinds of stimulus every couple of years.
Yes.
The longest I was ever at a job was 10 years at a head.
Which is a good amount of time.
It is a long time for me. But yeah, I think there is something that gets ingrained in you when you grow up and you move around.
Yeah. So how did you, I don't want to say fight it, but that's basically what I've been doing is no, Amanda, stay
Well,
put.
I think you substitute it.
For what?
You substitute it with new areas of focus, like starting a co-op.
Oh, yeah.
Or recently I've taken up, not recently, now I've been doing it for a couple of years, watercolor painting, kinds of things that are really, really different than what you've been doing in the past. And I think that, sort of meets that definition of a new stimulus.
That's a good point. Now that I think about it, I think I've been doing that. Because I'll pick something up for a couple of years and then I'll be like, ugh.
Well, you took up hiking.
Yeah. I haven't left that.
Yep.
I'm just taking a pause. But yeah, there's been there's just themes, right? And you shift into a new theme or project.
Yeah.
So that's what you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Recently, I got involved with a bank. It's called Walden Mutual, and based on this whole local food agriculture. It's sort of like the co-op kind of thing. When I was in banking, I did a fair amount of agricultural lending, so it's always been sort of an interest in me. And so, this is a virtual bank, which is sort of new. It's a mutual savings bank, which is not, it goes back to that mutuality issue.
Mm-hmm.
Banking, no one wants to start a mutual savings bank anymore because they want it to be a stock bank. They want to make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And so this bank was the very first FDIC-approved New Hampshire mutual savings bank in 100 years. There hasn't been a mutual savings bank started in New Hampshire in 100 years. So, that's another kind of sideways issue that I've taken up some of my time with as well.
Yeah. Is getting that going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really nice to see the effort that young people now are going back to farming. And the whole regenerative, trying to figure out grow local kind of.
Yeah.
But it's evolving, and it's kind of exciting to be in that world because now I sort of surround myself with all these young people that are really smart and it's fun to listen to them talk about things.
Yeah. I remember you telling me over coffee that you weren't smart.
Yeah, no, growing up, if it didn't have a ball, then I didn't do it.
So you were into sports.
I was definitely into sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a very big way. So the easiest way when you're a boy growing up like me and moving around the world, the easiest way to become accepted is to be a good athlete.
Yes.
It's the easiest way.
I mean, I'm a girl, and I did that with soccer.
So that was, it was sort of a
What sport did you do?
Sports. Well, I did soccer.
You did?
Soccer and
Yeah.
Baseball and basketball. Those are the three international sports. But I also played varsity rugby when I was in Taipei.
They played rugby in Taipei?
Yeah, we were actually the city champion 7-man rugby team.
Whoa.
Yeah, people don't even know what 7-man rugby is.
I don't. Is it different than...
Yeah, 7 people instead of 11.
Oh, it's supposed to be 11?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I don't know much about rugby. Okay. Now for some... Oh, we got some time left. One question I like to ask people quite often, because it's just so relatable, is like, can you tell me about a really scary time in your life that you faced and how you overcame it?
Scary time.
Yeah, like super scary.
Well, I think death is a scary topic.
Yeah.
I unfortunately lost a niece, a 5-year-old niece, who was totally healthy one day and dead the next day. And she caught a bacteria that causes spinal meningitis. And if you get that bacteria and you get spinal meningitis, then your body actually has the capacity to fight the bacteria.
Okay.
There are some people that have absolutely no immunity to it. And Elizabeth caught this. It's an airborne disease.
Okay.
And she got a fever in the afternoon, and she was dead at midnight.
Oh my gosh.
And I still haven't gotten over it. I am amazed at my brother and sister-in-law who have, anyone that's been faced with that sort of dilemma in their life. It's just amazing. So the fear of dying, maybe, or the fear of losing someone that you love, has probably been the most dramatic emotion for me. I've lost other people that I love. My mom being one, she died when she was 51. I think, though, that there's something you can tend to understand more when you get older. But that's probably the one fear that I've really tried to get over.
What have you found has helped you move forward in those...
Everybody's going to die. And I think learning to accept that, and like in the case of my mom, helping her to die because she had cancer, is a gift. I think in the case of my niece, it was a little bit more difficult because it was so sudden.
Yeah.
It's just over in a blink of an eye. But I think that maybe talking about death to young people not making it so scary is probably a really good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something that as a society we could probably get a lot better about.
I just appreciate you having the courage to talk about that. I mean, it is uncomfortable. Nobody wants to think about death and dying. It's immediately a very, like, somber feeling, right? People don't want to feel that way. We want to be happy.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious what, like, I haven't even heard of any efforts to have more conversations about death. And, there's hospice, but that's when people are already.
Well, but I think that there's a whole new movement about them, and it was.
Is there?
Yeah, and the hospice was kind of cool. I mean, when my mom had cancer, hospice had just started in the United States because that movement has been in Europe for quite a while.
Okay.
And, the whole idea of being able to stay at home and die was one that has really kind of resonated with a lot of people. And I think that just the discussion of doing that has brought it to the forefront so that more people talk about it. Mm-hmm. I think COVID has sort of kind of brought a new kind of bent to it, but I think that it's really important for us as a people to talk about those kinds of issues because I think it connects us to each other. If someone tells you about a loved one that has died, you automatically get a connection with that person because you can relate to it. So I think the discussion is a good and healthy one, and I think that our society is learning new ways to kind of have that discussion.
Yeah, that's good. I saw that connection a few times this past year.
So we'll turn it to a lighter note now.
Good. You saw the look in my eyes. Okay. We have about 6 minutes left. You know what I'd love to hear? Some of your favorite memories of being here in the North Country.
Favorite memories of being in the North Country?
Yeah. Just like when, let's say somebody from Taiwan reaches out and is like, what is your life like now? Like, what are the things that stick out to you that you would want to tell somebody about that's never been here?
Well, one thing that is especially impactful, and it's funny because my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday, about just how beautiful this place is. And, when I started working in Littleton, even though I had to commute, and it was 45 minutes to an hour's commute driving towards the White Mountains and having to look at the White Mountains, and then an hour commute going back and looking at the Green Mountains.
Yeah.
It's totally different than being in downtown Boston and having to be in the traffic for an hour. So I think, just this sense of beauty and awe that is around us and everywhere that you look and see. That's a pretty special thing about the North Country. I find that there is a reverence for people who I guess you can refer to it as Yankee ingenuity and Yankee values.
Okay.
There is a real, I get a kick out of it that there's a real sense of I can do it kind of mentality.
Independence?
Yeah, independence, that's a good word. That is, it's not unique to our area, but there are pieces of it that are really kind of cool to watch. Um, and I think that teaching young people the values of Mother Nature and how so much of it is at risk today. Um, the amount of pollution and the whole global warming thing um, is something that we really need to take to heart. And I think living in the North Country, we have a special sort of way of looking at that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yes, there are certain aspects of the culture here in New England that I haven't experienced elsewhere. And maybe it is elsewhere and I just haven't been there, but like
scraping your windshields, snow tires.
Yeah. There's just like this like just people do hard things here. But it's normal, right? To us.
Well, again, it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
It's not that other people can't do it.
Right.
It's just that it's not inside their culture. But yeah, there are some unique things to this part of the country that do make it special.
Yeah.
I remember at one time in my life I lived in Arizona, and although I had lived in a lot of urban areas, and although I wouldn't consider our family as poor, but we went without a lot of stuff when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd seen poor places in the urban areas, but when I lived in Arizona and got to see Indian reservations, the level of poverty that exists there is just absolutely amazing. And again, as a culture, and you live out there, you sort of accept it, that that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So, every place is unique.
Yeah. And you've seen a lot of places.
Well, I've seen a lot of places, but yeah, and it's the people I think that are really, really unique are the people who in the different cultures have the ability to keep a real positive attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Every culture you go to has a leader, and it's really interesting to watch them and how they can gather the troops to do things that are pretty amazing.
It's interesting you use the term "gather the troops."
Yeah.
With your military background.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Mike, we are out of time. I just so appreciate you being here today, sharing stories from all parts of your life, including some really tough ones. But it was very honest, and I really appreciate that. That's what this show is for. It's to show up as yourself.
Well, it was an honor to be here, Amanda. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, we will be here Tuesday at 10 a.m. And I don't remember who the guest is, so you're going to have to check on Monday for that. As a reminder, you're listening to WZNC LP Bethlehem North Country Community Radio, 99.9 FM. And we're streaming online at nofocommunityradio.org. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
There. Hope that wasn't too boring.
It was awesome. It wasn't boring at all.
I'm just going to go to the restroom.
Sure.
I know where it is.
You do? Fantastic.